Hi, everyone. It's Tom Abbott here. Welcome to another episode of the Selling in Asia podcast. And I am thrilled to have with us today Andy Culligan. Now, Andy is the Chief Marketing Officer at Leadfeeder, and he's going to be sharing with us some insights into what's working for them now. So, Andy, let's start off with how you got started in sales and how you got involved with Leadfeeder.
I think when I started when I was 14, I was doing the data entry stuff. But then when I got a little bit older, I started to move into more sales roles in retail. And then also, as I mentioned just there, like I started selling gym memberships on the street in December in Dublin, which is not pleasant, and only working on commission, which is again is not pleasant, selling gym memberships for €1,000 a piece, and only earning commission. So I managed to get by though, so it worked for me. And then that was during my university stage. So when I came out of university, I went into an SDR role. So BDR, SDR, so telesales rep, whatever you want to call it. Regardless of what the name is, it's a pretty tough job and a pretty awful job. I don't think anybody really wants that job per se, but it's a stage to get to the next level within sales, and it's like a rite of passage. You need to be an SDR or BDR in order to get to the next stage of account executive.
Sure is. And you know what? It's a really important stage. And I think everybody in sales should have a crack at being an SDR. So for those of you on the podcast that don't know the terminology, that's a sales development rep is an SDR. BDR is a business development rep. So they're typically the ones that are out there, they're hunting, they're prospecting, they're cold calling, they're cold emailing, they're qualifying leads, they're trying to schedule appointments and calls, and they're handing those over to an AE or an account executive.
Exactly. So I agree. I think that it's a really important rite of passage, the SDR. And I honestly think that the SDR is probably one of the most important jobs in the organization. And it's just not taken seriously enough.
Well, come on, man. They touch the customer before anybody.
Absolutely.
Holy
Absolutely.
smokes.
So exactly. So even from a marketing perspective, like you might bring a lead in and let's not call it an easy job for marketing, but it's not bringing that thing to the next level. Whereas the SDR are bringing it to the next level. They're really the human line of defense after a digital line of defense from the marketing team, or a digital line of attack, let's call it, to bring leads in,
That's
they're
right.
the next wave. And people don't give them enough pats on the back. I think it's a really tough job because you're young, you're junior, you're probably not taking that seriously, but at the same time you've got very hard targets to reach. So you're typically, within tech anyway, is that SDRs would be responsible for filling account execs calendars with meetings. So if you're not booking meetings, if you're not closing, because booking a meeting is a close,
That's your call to action. That's your sale. That's right.
Exactly. And it's not easy because nowadays trying to get through to people is really tough, right? Yep. So you're banging down doors, you're picking up the phone, you might be doing direct mail pieces, you might be sending emails, you're doing LinkedIn requests and whatnot. I mean, it's very, very loud. There's very, very many different channels in which you can reach people at, but people are a little bit overwhelmed, I think, from the amount of outreach that they're getting, I think I get it alone. I don't know how many cold outreach emails per week that I don't even look at, and I feel bad for it because I've worked as an SDR, I've worked with SDRs, I've managed an SDR team, and I get it, but it's too much.
The thing too, Andy, is a lot of them are just plain horrible.
Oh, for sure.
A lot of them are horrible, and look, I've done some podcasts. I've been on some people's podcasts and then, of course, on our own. And I just talk about just some of the worst outreach you can ever see is those people that the minute you accept their invite on LinkedIn, they drop you a proposal or they drop you a brochure or they're asking for a call. It's like, I don't even know who you are.
It's so one of the things that I used to tell my SDR team when I ran one just previous to my job at Leadfeeder was, when you pick up the phone or when you do some outreach to somebody, you have to remember that it's a human being on the other side.
No, you lost me, Andy. I don't know what you're talking about.
So I've been guilty of it myself as well, and I think about, okay, so look, you've got this is how many calls you need to make in order to get through to this many meetings. And I'm looking at it as a funnel, the same as if I make this many calls and I'm going to get this many meetings, and that many meetings are going to turn into this many meetings completed, and this is going to turn into this amount of pipeline, et cetera, right? And with that, we take away the human element completely.
Right. Yeah,
completely. and all you're focused on is then pick up the phone, send email. And it completely takes away from the personalization aspect of it. you don't spend the time maybe doing a little bit of research or understanding like a small piece, like what football team does that person follow, for example. Does that person have kids or not? Is there a way to find that out? You know, little things that you can connect to somebody with.
Totally. Anything that could just give me an extra 5 seconds of rapport building before they hang up on me. Just something where they'll maybe look at that email a bit longer. They might respond to that LinkedIn message. Okay, all right.
Exactly. Because nobody wants to be getting the cold outreach, you know? Nobody's sitting there waiting saying, oh, I hope an SDR is going to reach out to me today. You need to, there needs to be, exactly. I'm so bored, you know? There's nothing for me to do as a senior executive in a company.
My inbox is so empty.
Exactly.
I've achieved 0 in my inbox. Yeah, right.
Exactly. So I did that job for a couple of years actually, and then I then moved into an account executive role, and that was based in Dublin. I grew up in Ireland, but I actually then moved over to Vienna, Austria. So I'm married. So I'm married to a lovely Austrian lady, and we met back then, and I moved to Austria, you know, on like not thinking about it a huge amount, just being like, okay, well, let's move to Austria and see how it goes. Not with a word of German. You know, I didn't speak any German. It was like I was young and in love, and I said, oh yeah, and you know, what's the worst that could happen? It was tough couple of years of trying to slog it. Then I did an SDR job when I first came to Austria in German. So I blagged it and said that, you know, I can speak German, and I had my, like, you know, conversational German, and then I needed to do cold calling in German.
Oh my gosh.
Which was a disaster. So that, so, you know,
I'm just picturing these, like, you know, angry, harsh German accents yelling at you on the phone.
I swear, it was funny because sometimes it worked. So I was calling into hotels asking them to do like special offers for retailers, you know, that they'd be able to use in sales promotions. Okay. And the thing about the hospitality industry, you can be pretty certain that most people will be able to speak English. So I'd start off with German, and, you know, I'd start with the German piece, and then I'd move into, hey, you know, I'd ask them in German, können Sie English? So can you also speak English? And they'd say, oh yeah, we can. I was like, oh, thank God. You know, so then
they didn't come back and go, no, sprechen die Deutsch?
Some did, or many did, but there was a few that managed to understand me when I said, okay, let's move into English, and that actually kept me on board then for quite a while, you know.
Very nice.
So I did that for a while, and that was my first experience actually working from home. So it was actually for an Irish company, and I was based out of, like, I was just working from home remotely. But that was back in 2009, and 2009 was a very different place when it came to remote working. And I'll get to remote working now in a minute for Leadfeeder, but that, you know, it was a lot different. There wasn't the same technology available and whatnot, so it was difficult. It was difficult to be a remote worker back then.
Wow.
So after that, then I moved into a marketing role actually. So I'd studied marketing, and I always wanted to be in marketing. So I was a good salesperson, but I wanted to move into the marketing world, and I felt that I understood quite a bit from the sales perspective at that point. Anyway, so then I went into like a lead generation role. And served like the EMEA region with a company called Tate, and Tate do like private communications networks for like public safety organizations, governments, police forces, and whatnot. So completely different from what I'm doing today, but that was interesting. I traveled around Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and doing trade shows, a lot of lead gen activity. And during that time there, I learned a lot about marketing automation. I implemented their Marketo instance, and then quickly within the 5 years I was there, learned, or basically became the Marketo expert within the entire company, just self-taught. So I'd had some experience in email marketing. I built an email marketing tool in the previous organization that I was with a developer. And from that's how I got that job, and it just sort of, you know, went from there. And then after 5 years there, I'd moved into a company called Amarsis, and Amarsis are a marketing automation platform for B2C. So they've actually got quite a big presence in Asia. So they would be the main competitor of somebody like Salesforce Marketing Cloud in Asia.
Well, Salesforce is one of our biggest customers. So thanks for coming on, Andy. We're going to have to cut this podcast short. We're just going to blurt out that Amersis reference there. No problem.
That's all right. Just beep it out, you know? Yeah. No, so Salesforce, also a fantastic solution, I must say. Yeah, there you go. So so I back then, so I moved into a demand generation role with Amersis, and that was my start of in the tech space, I'd say, in the MarTech space, and that was back in 2015. With those guys, I'd built out then on like the marketing department along with the CMO, and they were in a real transition phase. We'd just gotten a first round of funding, like VC funding. We'd been privately funded beforehand. We got, during the time that I was there, we got 80 million euros in funding across a couple of different rounds. So with that, I was able to make a ton of mistakes. So people ask me, you know, what's the best thing about VC money is? VC money allows you to make, you know, some mistakes, let's call it, but it allows you to test a lot of things, right? So back then, we like the CMO at the time was very open to testing things, and I think it's really important as a CMO to do so. But we managed to have to grow at the same time, so we didn't make too many mistakes, but we made a ton. But with that, it helped me to learn a huge amount. So I wouldn't be where I am today without making those mistakes back early on then in my career back in tech, right? So within that time that I was there, I built out a global demand generation team, which was very, very closely aligned with the sales organization there, because we were responsible for creating the opportunities that would, you know, go into the pipeline of the sales org. So we had opportunity targets on a weekly, monthly basis, quarterly basis, and we also had revenue targets, which I built out then with the CSO and the CMO, so the chief sales officer and the chief marketing officer.
So that's
that was my role.
Andy. Let's not let that hang, and we'll go deeper in a moment, but I just want to point out for the listeners, so you were in demand gen and you had revenue targets.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, because not a lot of folks in, you know, marketing have any kind of revenue targets. So I think that's interesting just to note. We'll probably circle back to that later on.
For sure. I think that's the most important thing in a marketing organization at the moment. If you're not thinking revenue, then you're not going to be aligned with your sales organization. If you're not aligned with your sales organization, the marketing organization won't be taken seriously. The sales organization will go off, do their own thing, the marketing organization another, and then basically it's just a waste of resource. You know, you've got this gap in the middle which isn't being filled, and the message the sales org are going out with and the message the marketing org are going out with don't match. Right. And then you end up with confusion on the customer side. It's not good. It's not an efficient way to run. But yeah, like that's probably the most important thing to me is making sure that they have that alignment between marketing and sales from a revenue perspective. And yeah, I think if you're focused on revenue, then as a marketing person or somebody in the marketing org, you're going to be chasing after the things that are going to drive revenue, rather than chasing after things which are, you know, nice to haves. Like you see a lot of marketing teams doing things like, hey, this is a nice to have here. Let's say, for example, nowadays, one thing that I'm noticing is that a lot of companies are doing podcasts. Right now, I'm on a podcast now, and it works. Don't get me wrong, podcasts are great, and I think they work. But I see a lot of organizations just doing them because, oh, everybody else is doing a podcast. Quickly, let's do a podcast. Mm-hmm. And for me, I wouldn't do it because it may not work for me. You know, so I see it from our side, like, a podcast wouldn't drive revenue for our perspective, from a sales perspective. Therefore, I wouldn't personally do it. But that doesn't mean to say, like, for you, Tom, I see the podcast adding a lot of value to what you do, for example. So it doesn't work for everybody, but I see organizations like in my previous industry running podcasts, and I say this just doesn't work. I'm asking myself, why are you doing a podcast if it's not going to be driving the revenue that you're desiring?
And that's probably a question that they should have asked themselves from a strategic perspective before going on that, you know, initiative to have a podcast. For sure. That's the thing. So that's just a small example, but following the time at Amersis, then I moved into a more senior role with a company called Exponia, who were the direct competitor of Amersis, again, the marketing automation cloud space. I was there for
for almost 2 years, and so that the company was considerably smaller than Amarsis when I joined. So scale up organization when I first joined, it was below 5 million in ARR, so in annual recurring revenue. Then when I left, we'd grown the business up to just over 15 million ARR in the space of 2 years. So there was very, very high growth. The marketing team grew from like 10 people up to 50 people, wow, including the SDR team, which I took under me as well. And there was quite a lot of growth there, and it got to the stage where I said, okay, maybe...
So sorry, let me pause a minute there.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
so you in your role as the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer, then took the SDRs under you and reporting to you.
Yeah. So what happened? It's like a really simple. Like it's funny how it happened. So we had a senior leadership meeting, and I was a VP marketing there and VP of sales. So we had a CEO and then a VP there. So we didn't necessarily have a C level, but so it was myself, the VP of sales, and the CEO, and all the rest of the VPs were having like an offsite leadership meeting, right? And with that offsite leadership meeting, it was like we were talking about, okay, we need to reinvent how we're doing sales at the moment and whatnot. The VP sales had quite a lot of things on his list. Okay, so I said to him, you've got quite a lot of things on your list there. Do you really want to take like the kindergarten of the organization on as well? And he's like, no, I really don't. I need to focus on, because we were enterprise sales, right? You've got large annual deal sizes, right? So you're looking at probably like 100,000 euros per deal per year, right? So not small. And you've got these enterprise sales cycles as well that you're trying to deal with. So I said, look, let me do you a favor. Let me take on the SDRs. I've got experience as being an SDR myself, and we could take it from there. And he said, all right. So the way it happened was, we were in the meeting. I wrote it down on a napkin. Should I take the SDRs? Pushed it over to him, and he just wrote yes. And I took it back, and I said, okay, that's me taking the SDR. So that's how I made the decision to take over an SDR team. That
is probably the easiest sale in history.
There you go.
Like
it was a bit like a mafia movie in a way. We're all sitting around this table, and we're writing things down on exactly, and pushing it across the table. But yeah, and that's how I started off in the SDR journey with Exponia. And honestly, it was challenging. It was very challenging, but at the same time, it was very, very rewarding. Dealing with a young team and helping them build out their careers in sales and marketing, finding like a pathway forward for each one of those guys, building those pathways for them along with the guys was something that was, something I really enjoyed. Like, you had people from all different types of backgrounds, you had different struggles, different, different things going on at home and different things. So it was like a social activity as well, like from my perspective, like looking after those guys. They're all young, they're all maybe 20, 21, not a huge amount of experience. They're all looking to gain a lot of experience, but all very hungry to move on to the next level. How do you balance that? How do you show them the pathway forward and whatnot? It was something that added an extra layer to the marketing team from my perspective, which was quite interesting. And I wanted to have them there as well, because I didn't want any dropout from the leads we were generating. So typically what happens is, and a lot of marketing orgs will give out about this, is like, oh, I'm bringing in lots of leads and the sales team are just not even looking at them, or the sales team are saying, oh, they're not good, or whatever, and I wanted the control there to have the second wave of attack or defense, whatever you want to call it, as the SDR team, so that the SDR team would be taking on those leads that I would be getting from my marketing org, handing them across to them. And I wouldn't accept, hey, these aren't good leads, because I'm like, we're doing account-based marketing here. We're targeting the accounts which are of interest to you, which we have in our total addressable market already. How can you tell me that they're not interesting leads?
Right, exactly.
So that helped quite a lot. So from my perspective,
I love that, Andy. So you use the word perspective, and you've got a very unique perspective. So you started your career really as an SDR BDR, moved up, did AE, and then now more of a demand gen marketing CMO role. So you've seen the whole thing. So I can see why you have this perspective around having this alignment between sales and marketing. Can you talk about that a little bit more, Andy?
Absolutely. So this is probably the most important thing from my perspective in any role that I'm doing is that there's a certain alignment between, or there's a one-to-one alignment between the marketing and sales organization. So marketing and sales should be acting as one. So from my perspective, it's just bear with me 1 second. I've got a 4-year-old that's knocking around in here blowing a party popper in the background.
No worries.
the joys of family life and remote working at the moment.
That's what it's all about, man.
Everybody's in the same boat. She's running around in the background just blowing a party popper, but I think she's good now.
It's all good. I'm just surprised that my boys haven't kicked my door down yet.
It happens. But so marketing and sales alignment, I think that there is with the marketing and sales alignment piece, for example, myself and Yako, who's our CRO, our Chief Revenue Officer, speak probably like 10 times a day. So any decision that's being made from a sales perspective is also being passed by me, and anything that's coming from a marketing perspective is also being passed by him. So there's one thing, and like we were trying to put our finger on it in terms of what actually is the key thing that determines marketing and sales alignment, and it's a dependency on one another. So marketing rely on sales and sales rely on marketing, and unless you create that reliance or dependency across both teams, then you're going to start drifting apart. So when I first joined Leadfeeder, there was a certain level of sales and marketing alignment, but it wasn't the same level as it is now. And what's changed really has been I've gotten my guys to make sure that if they're running marketing campaigns, that they're running them past the sales leaders first, or the sales org, or anybody in the sales org. Previously, what would happen is stuff would just go out,
right? And
then the salespeople would be the last people to find out about it.
Yep.
You know, and that what happens with that is then you misalign a little bit in terms of a message, perhaps, because salespeople are at the cold front. You know, they're at the front line. They're at the cold face, and they're the ones that are speaking with customers on a day in, day out basis. Marketing aren't. You know, put it out there. Marketing don't speak with customers. I'd be surprised if a marketer speaks with a customer once a quarter. You know, and they can give you true insights in terms of what will resonate with the customer base. So typically what I do is when we're doing any content cycle or anything, I'll speak to a salesperson and say, hey, what do people want to read about? Like, I have this list. Does this actually make sense to you as a salesperson? And they'd say, yes, no, here's some suggestions, whatever. So what you're doing there automatically is you're opening the door to sales and allowing them to influence the marketing message, which will also then help push forward and bring in the leads that they're looking to bring in. And what you're doing with that as well is you're populating the pipeline. If you go to a salesperson and say, hey, I'm going to populate 60% of your pipeline, you're going to see pretty quick alignment there, you know? So that's how we do it. But at the same time, I think the main message that I think to give other marketers or salespeople is, if you want to get marketing and sales alignment, make sure that it happens at the top first. So the two at the top, CMO, CRO, CSO, Chief Sales Officer, Chief Revenue Officer, Chief Marketing Officer, whatever those commercial roles are, make sure that their targets are aligned. So do marketing have a revenue target? If not, then create one. Do it in line with the sales org. Make sure that both of the guys at the top, or both of the ladies at the top, or whatever, are well aligned there in terms of targets, and say, hey, I'm going to help you reach that, and you're going to help me reach that. And with that, you're basically bringing the two departments together as one organization, rather than two separate pieces that are moving in a different direction. And with that, it starts to trickle down. So then you'll have different people within the marketing org going back over to the sales org, asking them questions, and vice versa. So I think that from my side is the most important thing from an alignment perspective.
So I think that's really great, Andy. And you know, you've talked about having some revenue targets for the marketing team. Now, we all know that marketing should have some targets and some KPIs. Many don't, but those that do probably are around, you know, impressions and visits and all this kind of stuff. How does an organization start setting revenue goals for marketing?
So when I first come into an organization that doesn't have those as a revenue as a goal, so when I first joined Exponia, revenue wasn't a goal of the marketing team. I asked them, okay, so tell me what your results have been over the past whatever year. And I've been given the vanity metrics, I call them, as what you just said. Hey, we've got X amount of impressions on our ads, and we've got these amount of clicks. And I was like, okay, that's, nice.
Look how many likes on our Facebook page.
Exactly. Is that
or we just won
revenue?
this award by the Marketing Association.
Exactly. It's to me that's the old school thing in marketing, where people come to the marketing team and say, hey, a business run is coming up, we need you to do the t-shirts, and if anybody do it, like that's what I want to avoid. That's exactly what I'm trying to avoid from a marketing organization is, hey, they're the team that goes and paints pretty pictures and does the t-shirts for the next business run. So the one thing that I'd say to people is, and I use this quite often, is, use the KISS way of doing things. KISS, keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
That's for me personally, that's the most important thing, is really trying to keep it really simple. So start off by building out a funnel. And, when I say a funnel, you start off down the very bottom and look at, okay, what's our average order size? So when we close a deal, what's the average? Is it 100K? Is it 10K? Is it 10 euros? Whatever it might be, $10, whatever. Based off of that is that, okay, in order for us to get there, how many pipeline opportunities do we need to open? Okay, what's our conversion rate between both of those things? So if I open up 25 opportunities, am I going to close 5? Or am I going to, so if I open up 20, am I going to close 5? That would give me a 25% conversion rate between open opportunity then to 5 new customers. Okay, and start there. And then what you need to do is build it back up from there. So you say, okay, in order for us to get that amount of opportunities, then how many meetings do we typically have to book? Well, so based on the knowledge I already have, you'd probably be able to find out that information, like how many meetings do I need to book? And then you should probably have a layer in between there saying how many meetings do you actually get completed out of the meetings that you book. So that's an additional layer for SDRs or for salespeople. So if you put a meeting in the calendar, what's the likelihood of that actually happening, right? That's right. So it's an additional thing where you can measure and you can improve on the conversion rate. And then from there, you get into the more marketing focused stuff, which is around sales qualified leads, marketing qualified leads. And around that, the tips that I give to people is, like, again, keep it simple. Like, keep it really simple in terms of what's a marketing qualified lead. What is it? It could be as simple as, hey, it's a target job title from a target industry. And that's a marketing qualified lead. Sales qualified lead could go to the next stage if you know that they're in a buying cycle, or if they're using a competitor technology, for example. Then you know that they're sales qualified, and then you hand it over to the sales team. It's just an extra layer of qualification. And what at the start of doing that, for the top layer of the funnel, so sales qualified, marketing qualified leads, probably what you're going to have to do is make some assumptions. Okay, you're going to have to make some assumptions in terms of what are good conversion rates. You should take a look into it from your industry. But like typically, like if we're looking at overall lead to marketing qualified, or let's call it marketing qualified then to sales qualified, you should be looking at sort of like 40% of the marketing qualified leads that you're bringing in should be turning to sales qualified. So that means that, if you're aiming for 40%, like 40, 60 is a pretty good percentage to be looking at there. So 60% are unqualified and 40% are qualified. And if you go over that number, then great. But again, you should be making that very well known within the sales organization as well. So one tip that I give to people is that, a sales team come to me, and if somebody from sales comes, oh, the marketing leads are crappy, they're not good leads. And I said, well, what percentage of leads are we talking about here? Oh, probably like 50% of the leads I get aren't good. And I said, that's brilliant. That's fantastic, because I'm aiming.
You mean half of the leads you're getting are great? That's awesome.
Exactly. And I said, best practice would mean that, only 40% of the stuff that you're getting is great. Right. So and then said, okay, that's interesting. Right. So, you play with these numbers a little bit, but again, I think make some assumptions at the top of the funnel, the stuff down the bottom, and then just start working towards bringing in leads that are going to be focused on each layer there. So what you do is then you come up with different marketing initiatives where, hey, these are going to bring sales qualified leads. So it could be, for example, one-to-one meeting events. If you're in enterprise sales, one-to-one meeting events are great because you get the list of companies and a list of people that are attending prior to the event, and you may already have a quota of 10 meetings that are going to be fulfilled at that event by the event organizer, and they basically do a matchmaking. So you say, I want to speak with that person from that company, and therefore you'll already have 10 sales qualified leads. And then you might want to do more top of funnel stuff, which is less expensive, which would be driving marketing qualified leads, would be maybe content strategy. So if I create this specific type of content and I have a contact us form on that page, then that will automatically then help, drive more marketing qualified leads and so on. And you come up with different marketing strategies for each layer of the funnel.
Okay, cool, Andy. So would you say when we're looking at, having these revenue goals for the marketing team, those revenue goals are closely aligned, they're tied with the overall revenue goals for the sales team? Am I understanding that, or did I miss something?
Sure. No, for sure. So
it's basically you're starting, both own that target. Is that right?
That's right.
Got it.
So the way that I do it is again, you're starting up at top level leadership, and you're getting the C levels or VP layer, whatever the top level is, to speak with one another and make an agreement. So in previous organizations, the agreement has been, hey, marketing will be able to provide you with 70% of the pipeline, or 70% of your revenue goals. So when marketing and SDRs come together, I would promise 70%. So I'd say, okay, look, 70% of the stuff that's going to come in this year is going to come from the marketing org, right? Because it's either been SDR touched, or it's been touched by a marketing source. People tend to get a little bit deep into the bushes when it comes to attribution. So how do I attribute this particular opportunity? The answer to that is there is no good way of doing attribution. Okay.
Right.
There is,
because you don't know. Look, when you look in a CRM and you've got that tab there, lead source, it's like all of the above, most of the above. I mean, there've been so many different touch points. It's like, where did you first hear about us? It's like, dude, I don't know.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. So I think it's any
and is that even the right question, right? Because if the answer is, look, we believe that an omni-channel approach is most effective, then isn't that question, it's a moot point?
For sure. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think so companies that are really concerned about attribution are the companies that aren't doing well in terms of revenue. So that's if you're really concerned about attribution, then something's going wrong because you're not growing, right? So instead, maybe look at your overall customer acquisition costs and include sales, marketing, everything that it costs to acquire a customer.
Yeah.
And then look at, hey, is my CAC to my customer acquisition cost ratio to lifetime value of those customers is way too high, for example. Then I know I need to do something about my marketing efforts and my sales efforts, perhaps, right? And then when hey, my customer acquisition cost to lifetime value, that ratio is looking pretty healthy. Let's go dig in to see which channels are pushing the most leads from, right? But typically, unless you're selling, like somebody I used to work with say, hey, when we were doing enterprise sales, it's like, we're not selling bubble gum here. It's a complex sales cycle that typically has 6 to 10 decision makers. Those 6 to 10 decision makers are all different personas. You're going to have them across different layers within an organization. Somebody might be met in an event where somebody might download something, or a salesperson might have reached out to something. Let's all work together to bring in those accounts. Let's not worry about like who to attribute to. Oh, marketing won that account. At the end of the day, like what I would just wanted to see when I had the SDR team was like, has there been a touch from an SDR on it? If marketing has touched it, the SDR has definitely touched it. Then we'd know that it was somewhat sourced from the marketing and SDR org. But I wouldn't be looking in too intrinsically what was the key thing that made them make that decision.
And sometimes it's so tricky because we just had a real life situation like this earlier this week, where we're doing some outbound right now, and we reached out to a number of people, and there was we went after 2 or 3 people within one particular company. We got an email back from one of them saying, we're not interested. And then the following day, we received an email from another person from that company inquiring about our services, right? And then I think, if I'm not wrong, one of those people who replied not interested ended up being in the meeting. And now we're starting to, advance things. So you just never know. You got to hit people up different ways, and you never know what's going to happen.
I fully agree. I think, look, as I said, if you have a sales and marketing org that are working together and not working against one another, because I think that's what happens. You start creating this like, who's responsible for this deal? Is it sales or marketing? If you start that, then you're on the road to failure already, because then you're automatically pulling the two teams away from one another, because it's almost turning into a competition, because you're saying to salespeople, hey, you should be populating pipeline, you should be creating your own deals, and marketing should be creating that amount of deals. And it gets a little bit, it creates a friction between the two teams.
Sure does.
So from my perspective, I think it's just good to try to concentrate on that alignment piece. And then with alignment piece, everything is just going to start dropping in together. Like
I love that. You know, the key thing being alignment, and, you know, without getting too hierarchical or org structure-y here, it's almost like at the end of the day, what we're talking about is revenue.
Yeah.
Okay. We're just talking about revenue. And in the same way that you might have, you know, sales that has, you know, SDRs and AEs and maybe some, you know, key account managers. In the same way, you know, people, we're all on the same team here, sales. Isn't the relationship between these three people on the sales team perhaps similar to the relationship between the sales and the marketing team as it relates to revenue?
For sure.
They're just two different roles to achieve the same goal.
Absolutely. So they're both commercial teams. So that's the thing, and it should be just one commercial org.
Right. Okay. So that's a very interesting perspective. So, you know, you talked about that you've been remote working for, you know, a lot of your working life. So what have you noticed has changed in remote working, you know, from the time that you started to, you know, where we're at today?
Okay. So I've been doing, as you said, I've been doing some level of remote work for the past 10 years or so, or 11 years. And at the start, I think the one assumption that a lot of people have, and I told them that I worked remotely, or it wasn't even called remote work back then, it was called working from home. And working from home then was like, oh, you're just not working.
Right.
You know, like anybody that worked from home is like, oh, you know, you've been out and you've had a couple of beers the night before, so you're working from home tomorrow. I get it. And I was like, no, I'm actually working. I was like, oh yeah, sure. You're sitting there in your pajamas.
Yeah, but what do you do all day?
Exactly. So you know, that
it's
was
like more than I did in the office. I'll tell you that.
For sure, because you have this level of anxiety as well that you're trying to prove yourself that you actually are working. Because that wasn't only the assumption of friends and family and different things. It was also the assumption of people that were leading you, you know, because it typically wasn't a thing that was done back in 2009 was to work from home, right? At least not in the tech space or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, I felt like I had to justify the fact that I was working from home by like proving that I can get my number and whatever, you know?
Right.
Which brought in an extra layer of anxiety. And so I did that for a couple of years, and at the end of it, I was like, oh, I can't be doing this anymore. So then I went back to office work.
Sorry, and Andy, it's also just a huge mindset shift among leaders, because they don't know how to manage someone remotely, right? They're used to saying, hey, if I see Andy in the office every day, then I know he's working.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So they just don't know what to do with you when you're not in the office. So that's where, you know, clear communication with, you know, targets and KPIs and specific goals and checking in, all this kind of stuff. So it's
exactly
interesting.
I think from that perspective, back then I wasn't leading anybody, but I knew from my own boss that he didn't trust me, you know, that he'd be picking up the phone a couple of times a day. So what are you working on right now? And you know, which is demotivating for any employee, really.
Sure.
I think the most important thing about remote work is trust. So that when you're hiring somebody, you need to be hiring somebody that you know that you can trust. Like I'll only hire somebody where I have a good feeling about, obviously, but also somebody that I know that, you know, you've got responsibility to look after your own stuff here. You're going to be independent. And you have to get on with things. If you're not, then, you know, you've broken our trust and you've broken our agreement. But since I've started, you know, in the past 3 or 4 years, or 5 years almost, I've been doing some level of remote working. At Exponia, our offices were located in a different country. So actually in Slovakia, and I'm based in Vienna, so in Austria. So what I do is I drive there 3 days a week, drive there and back in 3 days, and then typically work from home 2 days a week, which was exhausting, but it worked, you know, with a mix of home office and different things. And now with Leadfeeder, actually, we're a fully remote company. So we've got about 85 employees globally, and 70 or so are remote. So that's the vast majority. So with that, like, the company's always been built that way, and I honestly think it's been built
Andy,
for success.
And by remote, are they remote globally, or what does that look like?
Everywhere. So everywhere. So
like how many different countries would you say?
Oh, that's a very good question. So at least like 20.
Wow.
I guess.
Nice.
Yeah. So, it's super interesting because I find it breaks down barriers for employment. If you want to hire people, you can hire the best people that are located anywhere.
Right. Just the best people.
Exactly. That's what you're focused on. I want to hire the best people. Exactly. So what you can do with that is first of all, the cost of doing business is a lot cheaper because you don't have overheads for offices. And then at the same time, the cost of employing people is a lot cheaper as well, because you're not hiring out of big cities typically. You're hiring out of places where people are based remotely themselves. A lot of people don't want, especially at the moment, people don't want to be based in big cities. So you manage to get, people that are very highly qualified and maybe don't want to work in the city, but they get to work from home, and we get those people for a little bit cheaper as well. That's the thing. So it's really set us up for really hiring the best people. I think that's probably the best way to put it. And everybody trusts one another to get the job done. Like, I don't have anybody on my team that I feel as though they're slacking or they're not picking up their weight. Everybody has a job to do, and I think everybody's doing it.
I love that. So what are some of the tools that you use? I mean, we talk about trust is so important. So, what are some of the essential tools that people need basically to do sales effectively remotely?
Sure. So Slack is important.
Love it.
So if for internal communication, so we use Slack here. We also use our own product. So we use Leadfeeder from an external sales perspective. So in that perspective, we eat our own dog food. So we use that. And then, I don't think you don't need to do massive investments in technology in order to get the most out of what you have. I've been at companies where there's been huge investments in tech, and at companies where there's not so big investments in tech. I think that the most important part is to keep your tech stack low. So don't try to have too many tools which you're trying to get talking to one another. Start off small. So we have our own database and whatnot. We use Pipedrive as our CRM. We're very happy with Pipedrive. I've used Salesforce before in the past as well, also an excellent CRM, but it's not so affordable for smaller companies, So I think it's important that whatever way you're using your tech, so for internal communication, Slack, for your CRM tool, the most important thing is that you make sure that you have somebody managing that CRM tool so that it doesn't get messy. So you want to make sure that your data is consistent, and that people aren't going in creating their own fields, or that there's a process in place for people to be actually able to use the CRM effectively, and making sure that all data is clean within there. So the sales team are following a list of rules. Here's your rule book. Here's how to use a CRM. Applies for marketing and sales. People
creating new contact records instead of doing a search to see if they're already in there.
100%. 100%. Exactly.
Pet peeves.
Exactly. So CRMs can get really messy really quick, and you need to have a police force behind it. So it's really important to have that. I think from an outbound perspective, if you're doing outreach, there's a couple of tools you can use. Sales cadencing tools that have worked well with me and have worked well in the past. Sales Loft, Sales View, those types of tools. But again, I think if you're in a sales role, the most important thing is, if you are using a sales cadencing tool, that you're still offering additional layers of personalization in there, which are probably fueled from tools like LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So Sales Navigator would be a top tool for most sales teams to have. If you don't have it, I would recommend to get it immediately, because it allows you to do that further research on the prospects that you're doing your outreach to. And that's it really. Like, I wouldn't go massive on tech stack. We're using an email marketing tool. We're using ActiveCampaign. Again, it's not breaking the bank, and it does the job that we're asking for.
Yeah.
If you're doing webinars like what we do, we're using currently, we're using Livestorm for webinars. Again, not breaking the bank, and it does the job. And yeah,
So you guys are using Zoom webinars then?
So we're transitioning at the moment, let's say.
Okay.
So we're transitioning over to Zoom. We have some discussions around the privacy elements to it. So that's something that we're looking at. But so from our perspective in Europe, it's whenever you sign with a new vendor, you just need to make sure that everything is all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed from a GDPR perspective.
Right.
So every vendor that we sign on with, we just need to make sure we have a data processing agreement, et cetera, et cetera. So we're coming to the end of that now with Zoom. But it's important. It's good that we have that in place. It's from a marketing perspective, it can be frustrating. Just GDPR generally can be frustrating because it feels sometimes that it slows down progress. But it's important that it's done because the privacy laws are there for a reason. They're really important. And yeah, from my perspective, I've been working in the German speaking realm for quite a number of years now, and this has basically been best practice anyway for maybe the past 10 years. So it's not too new, but yeah, so we're moving to Zoom soon, I hope.
Okay, very cool, Andy. So I guess, one last thing before we wrap up. I think a lot of our listeners would be interested to know, it's been some really challenging times the last few months, and things are hopefully turning a corner and things are starting to look better, but I mean, it could be quite some time before there's a full recovery, and who knows when and if that's going to happen. But certainly we're in a new normal, for lack of a better term, and things have changed. So what are you seeing right now, Andy, that's working for sales reps out there? Okay.
So we're starting to see growth. So it's really interesting at the moment. It was, I think the initial panic, let's call it, of mid-March is now well behind us. And I think people are just focused on on moving on and getting back to business. That's the first point I want to note. I think at the same time, globally, though, we're in a situation now where we're still all very much on pause, and everybody's still like, okay, what's going to happen when everything goes back to normal, let's call it, is like what businesses are going to fall out from that, et cetera, et cetera. But in terms of things that work from a sales perspective is do something. Okay, so this is something that, again, this is keeping it simple, stupid, is do something. Because at the moment, like prior to COVID-19, I used to get like 50 cold emails, cold LinkedIn requests, cold calls, whatever, a week. Now I'm getting like 0. Like people are afraid to do outreach right now. People aren't.
They just want to be sensitive.
Exactly.
So
and,
ridiculous.
Exactly. And people are sitting there doing their research, like buyers are sitting at home doing research, looking at, hey, what can I purchase? Or what am I gonna buy towards the end of the year when we get out of this, So people are in the buying mindset already. It might be early on, and larger projects may have been put on hold, but I'm also hearing from other like enterprise solutions. And I spoke with a guy yesterday who's selling an enterprise solution, a CDP, so customer data platforms, and to large brands, right? They sell it into retailers, and their deal sizes would be a minimum of 100K per year. And he said, actually, their business has started to speed up. Sales cycles have started to speed up, And it's because my initial question was, hey, have things been put on hold? Are people freezing budget? He said, no, quite the opposite. People are starting to spend. So I was, okay, that's great. And he said, actually, their sales cycle has gotten quicker. I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Another good one.
So absolutely. So I think, look, the most important piece of advice that I can give to people, salespeople in particular right now, and even marketers to a certain extent, just do something. Pick up the phone. Start doing outreach. Start doing that extra bit of research on people. Like, people are at home all the time now. Like, that little bit of research I told you about, does this person have kids or not? Do they, what's the thing that they're missing out on? As I said, do they support a football team and they haven't been able to watch their football team play? Start with that conversation, Yeah. And I spoke with a good, colleague of mine there the past week, a guy called Michael Hansen, who's a sales coach in the UK, and he did some research with a couple of clients, and he's actually seen in the past 6 weeks connects from LinkedIn, from cold calling, from emails have gone up massively. So from emails, I think that the chances of it actually getting a connect nowadays are like 14 times greater than at the start of March. So, you know,
this is the time to do it. For
sure. It won't last. It won't last because once everybody starts doing it again, it's going to get noisy again. But I think it's super quiet right now. And now's the time to start doing outreach.
Sure is. And, you know, it's so frustrating. I mean, as a sales speaker and a sales trainer, I want to see activity. Like I reward that. I like it when someone calls me. I like it when someone drops me an email. Sometimes whether I like it or not, I'll reply back going, this wasn't that good, but, you know, good job, keep it up. But look, what we're seeing on our side is a lot of people are just sitting back and just having a wait and see attitude. But this is the time for people to double down on their sales and marketing activities. You know, ad rates are going down, Google rates are down, Facebook ads are cheaper. You can reach more people with the same budget that you did before. It's not as cluttered, it's not as busy, it's not as noisy as it was before. So pick up the phone. In the last 3 months, I've gotten one phone call from a hotel. One hotel. Now, look, they haven't been able to have any guests, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be working your butt off right now to try to fill some pipeline.
Build your pipeline, 100%.
Build your pipeline. Let's go. Make some calls. Drop some emails. Connect with people. Like, this is the time to do it. So, look, I mean, I applauded them for reaching out. I said, look, I don't have an interest. Now, first of all, their pitch on the phone was horrible. It was the worst. The worst. But I said, you know, look, good job reaching out. At least I can still remember the name of the hotel because they were the only ones that reached out to me. So when things open up more, I'll be like, okay, you know, maybe this hotel is one that we could look at.
For sure. For sure. I think so. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. Is it's just start building pipeline, because what's going to happen is in 6 months' time, you're going to be like, oh no, I should have started picking up the phone. Right. I should have started doing something.
That was the perfect time, right? So, look, I always tell people at the end of the day, you know, there's a direct connection between today's efforts and tomorrow's rewards. It's as simple as that. In 3 to 6 months' time, and you're just like, you know, where am I? Why haven't I hit my number? It's because you didn't do anything 3 to 6 months ago.
Absolutely. I think so. Even when the COVID crisis started, the marketing team, you know, were asking me, hey, should we just like, you know, hold out and see how it goes? And I said, no, let's start like producing more content. Let's start doing more things. Let's start doing them more frequently. So we started doing a webinar series.
Brand awareness, get out there. We're here. We're open for business.
Absolutely. So what you're doing is you're creating a connection. They may not purchase today or tomorrow, to go to your point, but they may purchase in 3 months from now. They may not be looking to put their hand in the pocket right now, but in 2 months from now, they might be. And we're starting to see that now. So I think on the third week of March, it's actually funny. So I think Trump closed the borders in the US around the 16th, 17th of March or so. And I had a friend or a colleague from another company that does direct mail. He's a founder of this company called ReachDesk. ReachDesk do our direct mail platform based out of the UK, but they also have a presence in the US and New York. And I was texting with him and I said, hey, Alex, how's business going? You know, how are things? You've been affected at all? He said, I'm actually just in JFK now and I'm trying to get out of the US, you know, before I get deported, basically. so I said, yeah, it's a crazy time at the moment. This was on the Saturday right after the Thursday when Trump closed the borders. And he said, like we both just sort of said, oh, it's crazy times. Like, should we maybe be doing some content collaboration? He said, oh, let's speak on Monday and organize a webinar. So we organized a webinar, and with a couple of days, with a couple of days notice, we managed to get like I think 700 or 800 signups without spending any cash, nothing. You know, 700 or 800 people. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And that was in the space of 3 days. And then we said, okay, let's just try to roll out another one. Did another one, 2,000 registrations with Aaron Ross, you know? And then it just kept on going and going and going and going and going. So like in the space of 6 weeks or something like that, we've managed to register over 7,000 people for webinars with spending like $200. And the $200 we spent was like, hey, let's test out something on Facebook and see if it does anything. And it was
awesome.
Fine, but it wasn't. And, you know, with that, like they haven't all automatically turned into business. But now what they're starting to do is they're starting to, you know, we started to nurture them. As soon as they came out of that webinar, we started sending them more information.
They're leads you didn't have before.
That's 7,000 leads we didn't have before.
Of course. Well, that's perfect. Yeah, and look, there's always business to be found if you look for it. It just might mean working a little bit harder, digging a little deeper, reaching a few more people, but there's opportunities there. I just ran our numbers for May. Our April numbers were almost at our pre-COVID numbers. So that was very encouraging for us for April. And then May, we actually came in a little bit higher than we did in April.
There you go.
So look, our March was just the pits. It was a really horrible month. I remember coming back from some travel in late Jan or something, and so many engagements, speaking and training were just canceled, one right after the other. But we just, as a team, we doubled down. We managed to reconfirm all of those either for later dates or virtual sessions. So we didn't end up losing any revenue from those canceled gigs. So I'm so glad we just got the team to work really hard on that. And then we've just been doubling down, doing a lot of outbound and some great marketing. There's been some inbound that's come in, which is great. We treat every single lead as gold.
So you should.
Yeah, you put everything to it. And look, we just looked at the numbers, and already our April and May numbers are almost what our Q1 numbers were for those 3 months. And we're just starting June. So we're on the way up. So I'm feeling really good. So this is just a lesson. Everyone's just got to double down and just get cracking, man.
Fully agree. So we're the same. We're the same. Actually, what you just mentioned there completely mirrors our numbers as well.
Cool.
So March, pits, April, growth, slight growth, May, big growth. And June is looking to be the same again. So it's
possible. It's possible.
Yeah, 100%.
And I always tell people, look, in any time, good or bad, there's always going to be winners and losers, regardless.
Yeah.
Right. So some industries are tougher than others. Some are a little bit easier, but there's still going to be losers in the good ones and some winners in the bad ones. You just got to, double down and do the best that you can.
Do something. That's
I love that, Andy. I think that needs to be the mantra for this episode is do something. So thank you so much, Andy. It was great having you on the podcast. Where can people get a hold of you?
People can get me on LinkedIn. You'll just find me Andy Culligan. So that's Culligan. And you can also find more information about Leadfeeder at leadfeeder.com.
I love it, man. Great. Thank you so much for joining us, Andy, and all the best.
Thanks, Tom.
Cool. If you want to take your sales skills to the next level and learn how to master the entire sales process, join SOCO Academy and get certified in SOCO selling. The link is in the notes.